the music. Time to dance.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of DropPod. It is me, your favoritist boy, Austin Pfhorbear Ford, and joining me is the digital scientist himself, the coolest kid in school, Mr. Works a shitload of hours, Daniel, a.k.a. Knottian. Daniel, how are you doing?
Hello, everybody. Political situations aside, I'm doing okay, I suppose.
Yeah.
I got to play some Halo, and we'll talk about that a wee bit later. But I got to play some Halo, check out the new season, the ridiculous amounts of unlocks, which was a nice change from last season.
Yeah, man. Daniel, before we really dive into everything, all of the individual components that make up Season 2 Lone Wolves of Halo Infinite, I wanted to get your kind of high-level thoughts. I'm not going to make you drop a score on it, but like if you had to score or kind of go over what your first impressions, high-level first impressions for Season 2 Lone Wolves, what would that be so far?
I'd probably say 7.5 or 5. Or I'm sorry, 7.5 or 8. Jesus, it's been a long day. Because it's and for the record too, I'm one of the people that like I would give a 10 to a game, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's still very rare. So 7.5, 8, those are still fantastic scores. But in general, the new, like the singular new mode that I've played, the singular new map that I've played have been something I think the game needed. So it's good so far. It's not super great, but that's again first impressions.
Yeah, I think Daniel, I think you're hitting the same kind of sweet spot that I am. I think overall, I'm also sitting right around a 7.5 or so. So you said that you've played a good amount of Last Spartan Standing so far, but only Last Spartan Standing, haven't quite gotten to mess around in King of the Hill or anything else like that yet. What about Last Spartan Standing is working for you right now?
You know, we kind of joked the other day on You Had Me at Halo and called it the Baby Royale. And it kind of hits the nail perfectly, right? It's faster paced, and it is not it's not a 1-to-1 battle royale. Obviously, there's attrition aspects to it. There's there are no team elements to it for those that play 2v2 or 2-team or 3-team battle royale games. So that's obviously different. But it's seems to be a perfect marriage of Halo mechanics with BR, right? And it's also a great, like I was with you. I haven't won one yet, but I was in the top 3 matches in a row, and you don't get that zone change, you don't get that zone shrinkage until very near the end of the game, and that's when everybody's kind of gotten used to like, all right, they're spotting points, right? They've gotten used to using certain hot gates as where they want to get sit down and hunker down and everything. Yeah. But then that zone change happens and it totally throws that out the window.
It's interesting. I think that there might be some spawning issues with the zone, especially later on.
Spawn points is exactly my biggest complaint in general. I've noticed that despite the fact that the map is rather large, they do seem to only have about 4 spawn points on each end, because I can't tell you how many times I'll have spawned 2 other dudes spawn at the same time, and then we all, I get caught in the crossfire and vice versa. It's just that they've not really utilized the space well, I don't think, for spawn points, and I'm sure it's more than 4 per side.
If it does feel that way, though, I totally get that. It is a very large map. I feel like they did say in the blog post a few weeks ago now that none of the maps that released neither of the maps that released this season were specifically designed for the modes that released this season.
Right.
But Breaker really does feel like a great entry point for this mode. I will say, because you mentioned specifically that spawning is kind of your biggest hiccup with it right now, I would say that inversely, that mine is actually the amount of power equipment that drops on the map.
That too. Yeah.
I would not be upset at all in the slightest if they just got rid of it altogether. It feels like there's probably a dozen or more spawn points for these things, and they don't despawn, right? Like they'll just stay on the map until they're picked up, which means that at any point in time you could have give or take a dozen of these power-ups just all over
Just
the map.
hanging around.
And when you only have a dozen players, it can feel like weirdly unbalanced. Like I said, I feel like getting rid of them entirely is probably the best move.
Oh, I agree.
On top of the power equipment stuff, I think it's very interesting. The thing that I wasn't really expecting with the mode is not spawning with grenades and not dropping weapons. You are given unlimited ammo. For those who haven't checked it out yet, every weapon that you have has unlimited ammo, no bottomless clips or anything, but you're given everything that you need in order to score these kills. It's a very interesting weapon progression through the level up. I love the way that the level ups work, but to start with a sidekick and a disruptor is super weird in my opinion.
Yeah, especially when you need to get those distance shots.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. It's funny. I didn't even realize that you started with a sidekick as well until the second match.
Me neither, dude.
I
was like, oh, okay, I got one of these.
Yeah.
The way that it progresses too is super interesting, right? Like, it goes from sidekick and disruptor, and then it's disruptor and mangler, and then mangler commando, mangler and AR commando bulldog, and then
shotgun,
bulldog,
and then
BR. Like
right.
The progression feels incredibly intelligent, where like you have these weapons that are really good for close quarters, which makes sense because that's when the most amount of players are up. And then as the match progresses, you get further and further ranged weapons and a shotgun in your back pocket. I thought that it was a very interesting progression in that.
Yeah, when you're max level and you've got a BR and a bulldog, you're pretty well versed, well versatile in those exchanges that tend to either be super up close or super far away from the map because you're trying to run towards getting into the middle of the zone,
100%.
But
I love stacking, 4 sticky grenades, be it 2 plasma and 2 spike grenades, and then just like going ham. Like, yeah, that's right. My next 4 kills are sticks, and like I'm just gonna rain down hellfire on these guys. It's gonna be great. I think the mode's fantastic. Honestly, like I can't wait to be done with this at some point this evening so that I can play more of it.
Same. Not
Not to spend a whole ton of time on LSS, while it is absolutely, I think, arguably the best thing that we've gotten so far in Season 2. Some of the other interesting stuff that we've gotten is the new revamped King of the Hill. I know, Daniel, you said that you haven't played much of it, and I'll kind of just hit on it really quickly. I don't think that there's a ton to say about it. It is just basically King of the Hill, but with it going to this like charging up a meter to get a point and then 3 points and you win, it's very, very interesting. I think that it plays a little bit more like Territories does, typically, like traditionally Territories, but I do think that it's a fun mix-up to the King of the Hill formula, and if anything, it just has me way more interested in whatever land grab is going to look like. I think having one zone that moves around for King of the Hill is, that's pretty typical. That's King of the Hill. That sounds like King of the Hill. But for land grab to be like Destiny Control ripoff, but in a more interesting way than Control is in Destiny, like I'm super stoked about it. King of the Hill is solid. I think it's a great new take on it, and I'm all about 343 introducing new modes, returning classics that have new twists on them. I'd be interested to see what they could do with something like Infection based on the changes that they've made to King of the Hill. Things like that. I'd even be interested to see if they couldn't tweak Oddball to be a little bit more nuanced than it currently exists.
Yeah, and I agree too. Like, I think Oddball definitely needs a shakeup, especially since they, Oddball used to be fun when, like, being the carrier used to be fun because if you played your cards right and you gauged your distance and you knew the map well enough, you could still survive a 2-on-1 or a 1-on-1. But with the nuking of the damage factor with Oddball, it's definitely changed that for me in Infinite.
You touched on melee damage of the Oddball, and I thought that was a great transition to roll into some of the gameplay changes that 343 has made to Halo Infinite this season. Here's the thing: a lot of these changes are very interesting and do make the game better. And the ones that I'm specifically talking about, are like the Banshee changes, the sound design in a lot of places, even weapon decals. The sound design stuff obviously is your footsteps are a good bit louder and your health recharge is a good bit quieter. I love the changes to the radar. The radar has now a wider range, and it's been bumped, I think, from 18, I want to say, to 24 meters. And they added the border around it that kind of gives you the directional sense for where enemies might be if they're sprinting or shooting. Cool stuff.
All good things.
Yeah.
All good things. Yeah, and then, some of the other things, too, we touched on. I know you and Ursula touched on last DropPod, but, the opacity of, the highlights around enemy Spartans or friendly Spartans. All these different options that they've been adding to not only make the game more accessible, but also more tailorable for individual preferences. It's a nice thing. For me, my eyesight's terrible, so the red enemy markers have really helped.
Can I ask you real quick, not to cut you off super hard, have you turned the outlines off yet or messed with those settings?
I haven't,
so
because to me they're perfect.
I gotta tell you, I don't know if it's. I think it's twofold. I think it's one that I've gotten used to them at this point. 6 or 7 months in. Yeah, and I think that it's also because of the elimination of red and blue players.
Red versus blue.
Without them on, I felt like a fucking bat, like wandering around maps. Like, are you on my team or not? Like, I can't tell.
Friend or foe, bro.
I had to turn them back on. I have them barely on, but has made a big difference. I think that, again, that tailored experience, like if I'm only playing free-for-all or if I'm loading into Last Spartan Standing, I do turn it completely off. I think it adds to that sense of immersion for me in a lot of ways. It also kind of gives me that like nostalgic classic Halo kind of vibe. But I think, like you said, I think it just adds to the experience. Just adds. Games couldn't have too many options, right?
Right.
I mean, I guess
it's funny,
could, but
the amount of options, the amount of ability to tailor this game. Like, I looked at the options just the other day. I guess it was yesterday when I was looking at, because I also have a Series S, and so being able to turn that to 120 hertz now is fantastic. But the amount of options in this game, man, it's like an old school RPG where you used to spend hours in the menus just, tailoring your equipment or your spells or your materia, blah, blah, blah. Same type of thing, which it's a great thing. I mean, the fact that they've made, I think these type of things get glossed over because they're not sexy or whatever, but the ability to make such a tailored experience for you as a player, especially if you like me have horrible eyesight, or if you have if you're differently abled otherwise, it's nice to be able to have a game that respects the player.
Something that I feel like we should touch on, but maybe not spend a ton of time on, are the little things that aren't working right. There are some bugs, as there will be with any live service game or any game update in general. The biggest one that people are really pointing out, I love that they're calling it this, by the way. It makes the game feel, I saw someone say, oh, Halo Infinite just got more realistic, which is the weapon jamming bugs, where for some weapons, more than others, like the BR and the Heat Wave, I guess, your next input isn't being registered on certain weapons, depending on when you trigger that. So, you could be hitting bursts on your BR and then the game just eats an input. Little things like that, as well as some of the more interesting changes to campaign, taking out some of those bugs to probably add stability to the game as well. Daniel, is there anything that you've experienced or that you've seen that really feels like, obviously 343 should try to address as soon as possible, maybe in the first DropPod?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have noticed the weapon jamming. I just didn't realize that that's what it was. I definitely think that there's also some other issues still with latency. You actually get the notification on the top right when there's packet loss issues. And to verify that it wasn't something wrong with my network, I even played on my Series S with a wired-in connection. But I, know that from a fact that has no packet loss up there, and so the fact that I was still getting it, there definitely seems to be a lot of rubber banding and things like that on Last Spartan Standing. I did play some standard Team Slayer, did not have issues there, so I'm not sure if it's directly tied to the map or the mode itself. But yeah, those are the two things that I've noticed. Probably the latter more than the former.
Totally. I have noticed some I wouldn't say more, than what we've been dealing with, just the continued existence, right, of the latency issues. Oh, I think it is kind of worth mentioning real quick the narrative stuff that we've seen so far.
Yes, that's what I was going to touch on.
The confirmation that Lux Veluspa is tied to this. I think that has a bigger thread, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. It is cool to see that stuff. I think there was some weird issues with Agrinia's Spartan model in that cutscene that she's in.
The lip sync.
Even her eyes look very off,
Yeah.
which they haven't in any other cutscenes. Could be a lighting thing, who knows. But I think the narrative stuff is building very interestingly. Iritus, the AI, is hilarious. I was laughing my ass off listening to him talk about how he will chew up our bones and all of that fun stuff. What'd you think about the narrative stuff that we got?
It was awesome. I mean, again, for the first time since Reach, being able to see your Spartan in a cinematic was awesome, of course. But yeah, the whole, I mean, even down to the okay, this AI has motor functions on this Spartan.
Yeah.
When he's convulsing. Sorry, my cat is going crazy. Come on. I swear, anytime I start podcasting.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, the cinematic was really well done. They're clearly setting up, hopefully, as we've talked about many a time, they're hopefully setting up stuff for some sort of PvE expansion, campaign expansion, whatever it may be, where you're actually taking your Spartan along with other Spartans to.
Daniel, I don't know if you saw the leak on Twitter today, but it does look like some of the Academy space is going to be playable again, maybe as early as the next narrative event in July.
That is awesome.
Which, super rad. Please give me more of that. I am all about PvE content.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, like you said, your Spartan being in the cutscene, it's all super cool. I think that the writing was solid for it. I think that there was a cringy line, and we all know what line it was. It was their wolves back from the hunt.
Right.
But then, the rest of it, and maybe this is reaching a little bit on my end, but the rest of it feels very Joe Staten, which we know that he spent time at least writing some of this because he tweeted about it a couple of times. The Iritus dialogue specifically,
I was literally going to say
feels
that. It's
so Bungie, it's not even funny.
Right. Yeah. It's straight up Staten. I mean, again, the fact that it's okay, there's something obviously serious going on, but the levity that Staten's writing has always brought is just extremely appreciated. And I mean, even things down to the way they animated
his mouth when he's talking.
Yeah.
Oh my god, dude!
Great.
I was
so
crying,
good.
almost laughing at that stuff, dude.
Yeah.
It was so good. I can't wait to see more of that. But Dan,
it was fantastic.
I think that does actually wrap up our season 2 first impressions. I will give it to you one more time if there was anything else that you felt like we should kind of bring up here while we're coming to the end of the episode.
Yeah. So obviously not Halo related, but as I've alluded to, and Austin's talked about it too, and millions of people have talked about it online because it affects so many of us. I think it's really important for people to be paying attention to what's going on with the Supreme Court in the United States right now, and how they are effectively trying to eradicate women's rights to abortion and many other things, including if you actually read the leaked draft on what it means for the LGBTQ community and so many others, it's terrifying, and it's one of the things that's just a start. And of course, I'm going to tell people to vote, but beyond that, there is a great site to help out people who are in need, who are terrified right now about what may happen to their own rights and who may need an abortion. Abortionfunds.org/funds is a great place to help people out. Protesting is always, no matter what people tell you, it will always be effective when people come out in mass. And if that doesn't work, eventually striking and rioting, peaceful rioting, obviously, may be the way to go. But it's a terrifying time for people. and you have no idea. You probably know, every one of you knows a woman who has had to have an abortion, who has been put in a position where one is necessary, whether it be due to assault, rape, etc., etc. So I think, we as men who know people like that, or who've literally been in the situation with somebody, a significant other like myself, it's important. So it's important to stand up. It's important to make a stand. So
I agree completely. Daniel, thank you for saying all of that. I know it's very stressful right now for everybody, or at least if you're paying attention to what's going on, it is. Like Daniel said, there are plenty of resources, and I will link some of them in the description of this video. If you want to help, if you want to get involved, there will be ways to do so, guys. Halo effects.
And as much,
go ahead.
As much as we sometimes I joke about Destiny being lesser than, like, Bungie came out today in full support, and that's the type of thing that needs to be done too. Like, hold people in power to account, and hopefully. Games don't live in a bubble. Games are political, whether you realize it or not. And the people who make those games are always affected by what happens in politics. And so it's just as important for those that are in power, whether that be, the gaming industry, whether it be politicians, whatever, to hold those that are trying to limit the rights of others to account. So.
I couldn't have said it any better, Daniel. I think that it was great to have you on for this, besides just your opinions, and also for a beautiful closing statement. If anyone here is interested in looking for resources or trying to pay attention to this, and you're looking for a spot of levity, because this can be very heavy and it can weigh on you, go read some of Bungie's tweet responses to people. They've been amazing. They called somebody a toaster yesterday. I fucking cried laughing at that. Guys, life is a hard thing that we all have to kind of deal with and go through, and there are things outside of your control. There are things to care about. There are things to focus on, but never worry that you're letting something bother you too much. It is okay to feel those stresses. It is okay to feel like things are bad. Just know that things will always eventually get better.
Yep.
Especially if you help make a big ruckus about it. Doing whatever you can truly make a big difference in things like this. Call your local congressperson. Call your local representatives. Like, make sure that people know that we're not going to take this lying down. But Daniel, not to keep people here for too much longer, where can people find you online?
So they can find me on the XboxEra forums. Knottian is my username. And on Twitter, I am Digital Scientist without the final I, because character limits, and somebody else has my actual tag. So those are the two best places. And then you can also find me on Signal if you are in the game industry and you want a story told. Just ping me on Twitter, and I'll give you the contact over there. To add on to that as well, we are stronger together, and everybody goes through struggles, and everybody is dealing with some insanity right now. So reach out. Don't be afraid to get help. If my DMs are always open as well. Even if I'm not the right person, I can point you to the right person. So.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you made it this long into the video, go ahead and drop a comment that says something like Halo for life. Halo is life. Master Chief says trans rights, and fuck Matt Gaetz. Thank you guys so much for watching. I have been Pfhorbear. That is Pfhorbear. That is Pfhorbear. Guys, find me anywhere you like to. Twitter, Facebook, not Facebook. Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, whatever you like to watch things on. I'm probably making things on that thing. Guys, thank you so very much. Until next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Be safe and have fun.